But my name is Mike Peterson. I'm with Loft Labs, technical marketing, make demos and videos and talk about vCluster and many of our products. And I'm joined here by Jeremy, who is our actual engineer. So I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to introduce yourself and say what you do here.
Yeah, so well, I'm Jeremy, and I mainly work on the vCluster components. So everything related to vCluster and the Pro distro and all of that.
So you have all the answers. I have a couple answers. You have all the answers. So all right, cool. So we've got a couple more people in here. Like I said, if you have any questions, post them in chat, post them in QA. Let's go ahead and get started. So what we're looking at right here is a vCluster.Pro login. So the first thing you're going to notice about vCluster.Pro versus vCluster open source is there is a UI. So let's log in. All right, so this is the actual UI. So what we can do is take a look at kind of some of the plugins and things that are running here. If your users log in, this is what they're going to see. I've got a couple of things already configured. We've got things like projects, so you can have multiple projects and then you can add users to them. I'm going to actually go into the project now and kind of show off what that looks like. One of the interesting things too for Jeremy is like everything is a CRD, right? So everything in here that you're creating, projects, everything CRD.
Yes, essentially it's everything is a CRD, so you can control pretty much everything with the Argo if you want to, and yeah.
That's another feature of Pro versus the open source version. So open source version is like a Helm chart, right? Whereas like Pro, basically what are you doing? You're creating a request to create something and it goes to the vCluster.Pro API and creates it because it's running in Kubernetes, right? Like that'd be accurate. All right.
Yes.
So all right, so here's a project. So this is where you're actually going to set up access and allow users to access things. So if you have multiple users, you can add them in like as a user one at a time. Like I've got Jeremy here, I can add him in and give him access to this project. I can also assign teams. We'll go and look at members and show teams. So like I've got this AI ML team, which is Jeremy and myself. I can add us to this project. Interesting because you can have multiple people in here. You can have different projects and have different teams be part of different projects, but this is letting you kind of slice up your Kubernetes cluster and allow multiple people to access it. And then within each of these projects, it's going to be its own namespace, correct? Like its own namespace in Kubernetes. And then their stuff is going to get deployed into this namespace, like their virtual clusters and stuff like that. So, all right, let's go. We got teams. Like I said, anyone has any questions, let us know. I'm going to go through this kind of faster, but I'll try to ask Jeremy some questions too, so we can kind of expand on it. So Jeremy, we've got what, 3 users: project admin, project user, project viewer. So kind of standard, the admin can administer the settings for a project. User, it's just going to be able to log in and create things. And then viewer is just someone that you want to give access to view things. Maybe they need metrics or something like that on things that are running. That'd be pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. Now, the next setting is templates. So what do templates do? So templates will allow you to template out what the virtual clusters will look like. We're going to look at templates after we finish going through some of this configuration. So what I can do with templates is I've got multiple different templates that I can set up for virtual clusters. Like I've got these 3 right now, which is just isolated regular template. And then I created a custom template with like sleep to change the sleep parameters of something like that. So what you're going to do is probably create templates for what kind of virtual clusters you want to create. That way your users are going to have specified settings for their virtual clusters. Like maybe certain applications will deploy with it. Oh, we got a question. Hold on. So let me finish this and we'll go to the question. You can have applications deploy with it. You could set up things like syncing ingress, and you can have certain defaults for your users, like maybe isolated too, so they can't talk to other virtual clusters in Kubernetes. All right, so let's see. If you have multiple Kubernetes clusters, each running several vClusters, can you use the UI for the front end for both physical and virtual clusters? Okay, yeah, here's Jeremy's answer. You have a single UI for all the clusters. Yeah, so we'll go in. So right now, this is set up with a single, it's accessing a single cluster. So this is vCluster.Pro running in a K3s cluster. I can connect multiple clusters to this, and then I can have my users have access to multiple clusters. What's neat is once we get to quotas too, I can actually set up quotas so that the users have a certain quota against all the clusters that I've given them. Say they have 3 clusters, and I say they can create, two virtual vClusters or something like that. They can only create 2 vClusters across all of those, right? So I can give them access until they can create it in certain spots. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Jeremy. Like, some of the cool features of multi-cluster.
Yeah, so essentially you can give access to, if you have a team or something, you can give access to specific clusters or a set of clusters, and then like the quotas that you have will apply across all of these clusters. Or maybe also we have the capability to just limit for each cluster.
Yeah, so I think I can give them access to, yeah, so next step, allowed clusters. So right now I've only got one cluster, local cluster, but if I had other clusters that I connect in here, like EKS or have this running somewhere else, I can add that in and then give them access to it, and then they can deploy there, right? So they can select which cluster they want to run it in. So maybe you've got like a clusters running in VMs, and then you've got clusters running on bare metal with GPUs or something like that, and they need to create a virtual cluster that has access to that specific bare metal one that has a GPU, then they can create it there. I can also select which clusters each group is going to have access to. So maybe the AI ML team needs that, but maybe dev team doesn't need access to that cluster. So I'm not having them run their workloads on a cluster with GPUs and like wasting a bunch of money because they don't need to be running there. All right, so yeah, so templates. We'll go look at templates in a few minutes down here at the bottom. Templates allow me to tell or let my users create specific kinds of virtual clusters. Allow clusters lets me connect multiple clusters and then give them access to specific clusters. This one we're doing all clusters, and then quotas. All right, so quotas will allow you to specify how many things users can run. So this has all like the Kubernetes basic stuff, right? So I can do CPU and memory and things like that, namespaces, whatever. In this scenario, what I'm saying is I want to allow 5 virtual clusters per project for this, so I can kind of limit how many my team's able to create. And then I've also got virtual clusters active, so I can say you can create 5, you can have 5 running, but you could also do something like they can create 5 and then have 5, have the 3 in sleep mode and only have 2 running at any given time. Like if I want to limit how much they can actually run, that way maybe they can template out a vCluster that they want to use for certain things, and then once one's asleep, they can create another one or they can delete them, stuff like that. But if we look at like the options here, like you've got like CPU, a bunch of like the built-in like Kubernetes stuff, like memory. So I can limit how much they're able to access. And this is across all the clusters they have access to, right? So if they have memory set to like 120 gigs, that's 120 gigs across all the clusters, not each, right? So if they do 100 gigs on one cluster, they can do 20 gigs on the other cluster, something like that, which is actually pretty cool because it lets you have multiple clusters and reduce how much everyone's allowed to have access to. Maybe you have like some chargeback system or something like that, and you're charging them based on like how many they are allowed to have. So it's a good way to limit. And then if they want to go up to the next level, like 20 or something like that, you can change it from 5 or 10 to 20. And then I can also within here in each of the projects, I can limit each user to a certain amount. So say I got a team of like 10 people. I don't want like one user going in and creating all 10 available clusters they may have, or 5 that they have. So I can limit it to 2. That person can only have 2. And then I can also specify what kind of template they're using, or I can say no template. So just any of them. I don't know if you want to expand on anything with quotas, or if anyone has any questions about quotas. It seems like super simple, but it's a really cool feature to be able to limit what users can create across multiple clusters if you've got like a bunch of clusters running. All right. And then here's one of the other additions that we have that's in Pro. This is the ArgoCD integration. So what's cool about this, I'll show you this in a minute actually, is I can enable ArgoCD integration. So say you're using ArgoCD to deploy things, and you create a new virtual cluster, and your workflow is create that virtual cluster, put it into ArgoCD, and then deploy to it. I can enable this integration to where if a user creates a virtual cluster here, they can add it to ArgoCD after it's been created, and then it'll actually become a target for them to be able to deploy to. And I'll show that as a demo here closer to the end and kind of show that off. Seems simple, but yeah, basically what I'm doing is I'm telling it where it's running. This one's running on local cluster. I tell it which namespace Argo's running in. If it was running somewhere else, I could put that in. And then I can enable SSO integration. So what that'll also let me do is log into ArgoCD from the vCluster UI, so that my users don't have to log in again. So I can give access that way. I'll show that off the demo a little easier, a little bit more interesting. So Rancher, this is also another plugin that we have. So I'll show off Rancher too. So if you're running Rancher, I don't know how many people are running Rancher or are using Rancher. I'll show the demo here at the end of Rancher just to kind of show what it looks like. But if you're already using Rancher, this adds the vCluster.Pro into the Rancher UI to where users can create a new cluster in Rancher, and it'll come over here and finish it out. So you can manage these. Yeah, please do Rancher. Okay, yeah, I'll show you Rancher. Stand kind of closer to the end. I'll actually go into it. And basically for Rancher, all you need to know is your project ID and the cluster ID. There's some more information that you end up setting up in the admin sections, like the token and where to access Rancher. I'm not going to show that because it's token information, but it's pretty easy to set up. We actually have a video guide on how to set that up too on our channel. And then HashiCorp Vault, like I don't have this integrated or set up, but you can integrate HashiCorp Vault too for secrets and stuff like that. Did you work on this one at all, Jeremy? I think this is mostly Thomas.
No, I mainly work on the vCluster features themselves, not on the UI, like on
Okay.
the but I think it's Thomas. Yeah, cool stuff that he did.
Cool. So I can also like change like who owns this project, right? So I can give someone specific ownership, and then like I said, I can make someone an admin, like Jeremy can be admin, so he can come and edit these settings if I want users to manage their own stuff, or if I want my like DevOps team or my platform team to manage it, I don't have to give them access. All right, so we're not going to save changes here. So let me look at my stuff I've shown off and make sure I'm on the right stuff. All right, let's go to templates. All right, so now what we're going to do, oh, we have another question. All right, so if we integrate vCluster and Rancher, how about the authorization identity provider? I'll have to show you like what actually sets up. So what it is it's a Rancher plugin. Here, since we're getting Rancher questions, let me go ahead and open Rancher. All right, so here's what Rancher looks like, right? So what we've done with Rancher itself is we've actually added the vCluster. Let me find the extensions. So we've actually installed the vCluster.Pro plugin for Rancher. So there's an extension that works with it. You need a couple of configuration options, like you need to put information in Rancher about like where our virtual cluster, our vCluster.Pro server is, and then a couple other configuration options in vCluster.Pro. But what it ends up doing for you is letting you do something like create a virtual cluster, right? So let's create a test virtual cluster, and I'll put it in our AI research project. And this is going to take me over to the vCluster.Pro to finish it out. And then I'll just create. So basically what you can do is give your users that are already using Rancher access to this. And it'll come over here and auth for them. Like you can auth through it and get access to the vCluster UI without having to actually create a bunch of users. Like you can sync the users and stuff over. So let's go back over to Rancher. While that's creating, we'll go look at something else, but that'll take a minute or two to create, and then it should actually start showing up into the Rancher UI once it's done. As long as my demo stuff works live. But the authorization identity provider. So the auth stuff and everything, like we have docs and stuff on that. It might be a little bit better since, like I said, this video is gonna probably go on YouTube and be accessible. It'll probably be better to show you a demo like that through like the sales team, so that they can have like a fake token and stuff like that and show you how to actually set everything up. I also got a video on the integration that walks through the setup. It's all pretty easy to set up if you're using Rancher and you know like what the ID information and all that stuff is. It actually looks like it's ready. Let's see if it shows up. Where'd it go? Oh yeah. These buttons here. So I showed the ArgoCD stuff that's set up. I'll just add both of these in real quick, and then I'm going to move over to templates and then re-show these in the UI. So let me move on to the next thing real quick while that's taking a minute to reconcile and look at templates. And then so we'll go back to Rancher. So templates are what you're actually going to use and give your users access to create the virtual cluster. So if you've ever created a vCluster via the command line for the OSS thing, you've got stuff like, sync ingress, core DNS, like all the stuff that you can configure in the values YAML file, soon to be the vCluster, I think, YAML file. So you can configure all these defaults, like say you want your users to sync their ingress. So if they create an ingress resource in their virtual cluster, it'll sync to the base cluster, and you're running something like Nginx or something like that. It'll work, and it'll sync it down, and then it'll create it on the base cluster. So you don't have to have an ingress controller per virtual cluster. You can just rely on the ingress controller that you have. I know, Jeremy, look like you want to add something. You want to add something in?
No, yeah, essentially just like to enforce some kind of configuration. So it doesn't have to be the whole configuration, but if you want to have specific field sets, or you want to limit the choices for what they can sync down or sync from the base cluster, that's super useful.
Or if you want to like force HA and stuff like that too, so that they have it running multiple spots. Yeah, like
you can
but then
disable HA altogether because it's
Yeah.
clusters, and then you don't really care about HA and you care about saving CPU. That's also great.
True. And then like I said, so here, like once you define everything, you can restrict certain projects to templates too. So you can make sure that you're controlling what the users are actually deploying for their vCluster. Um, which is great if you have users that they just want to get stuff done and just deploy something and have everything work without having to go in and configure everything. But it's also great for people that want to try to break everything because they only have certain limited options. All right. So you can select the Kubernetes version for the template. Um, Name it up here, whatever you want. This one's already configured. So actually, let me go show one with sleep, the sleep one. There's also, so this is like a very basic one. Like all I've done with this one is sync ingress enable true. And then I've gone to sleep mode to actually set up how long I want it to go to sleep after inactivity. So this is another feature of the pro stuff. So say you've got a team of users and they're distributed and maybe one user is using it, during EU morning and then your rest of your team is on the West Coast. You can have it to where if they're not using the virtual cluster for a certain amount of time, it'll go to sleep. So it's just a scale to zero type deal, Jeremy. What's special about it?
Yeah, so essentially, like all of your workloads will be not running anymore, and only very minimal components will run until we detect that you are trying to use it. So, for example, you use kubectl or you use the API, and at that time we will spin back up your workloads, and then you'll be able to use them.
And how's your state saved?
The state is in etcd or in K3s, and so basically it doesn't change. It's just that we don't enforce this, like, so we don't reconcile to reach that state while it's in sleep mode.
Okay, so awesome. So it's kind of like it's deploying it again. I guess that's kind of the idea. Like vCluster's there, but like the workloads are just being deployed again.
Yeah. So it's so you recreate the containers, you recreate the deployments, and all of that. So it's as long as your app supports restarts, essentially,
Yeah,
sleep mode will work fine.
awesome. So it's kind of like I like to think of it as like a um with like virtual machines and stuff being able to oversubscribe or something like that. It's kind of like that idea, except not 100%. Like if you want your stuff working at a certain amount and like that your users are distributed, then it's great to be able to like put it to sleep and save costs and have less workloads running on your nodes, right? And if you've got like auto scaling or something like that running on your clusters already, and like these workloads can go to sleep, maybe you can scale down and then scale up so you can save money that way too. All right, let's see. I think we've got another question. Let's say we build a multi-tenant Rancher vCluster as a cloud provider. Which dashboard we give access for the tenant customer, give them vCluster dashboard. So you keep working through Rancher, right? So you would keep working through Rancher, and then Rancher will allow you. So uh, Rancher will let me log out of here, and I'll come back. And then, so like say your users only have access to Rancher, they can log in over here, and then it logged me in again. Sorry, already. So you can log in with Rancher. Like Rancher will be like your SSO to where you can just like log in that way. So you would basically have them work out a Rancher, and then when they want to create a virtual cluster, it'll take them to vCluster.Pro. It'll log them in, and then they'd probably come back here if they want to like look at a bunch of like information about like the cluster itself, right? So they can like drill down into it. I'll see what error it is. Of course, it's like an error on a live one. Let's see what it says. Live demo error. All right, let me go back over to templates real quick. All right, so sleep mode. Sleep mode's great for saving money, reducing the amount of stuff that's running at any given time. Awesome. All right, I'm not going to show objects, but I will show apps. So like applications, like say I want to deploy a certain application every time this vCluster deploys, I could set an application up here. In the app section, I can actually have multiple versions of it too. So like I could have, like an older version of ArgoCD or Cert Manager or something running for like a workload that's a bit old or workload that's a bit older to test and make sure that it works on the older version. And then I could have an upgraded version of the template with like a newer version of Argo or a new version of Cert Manager, and then run my stuff on there to see if it works. So basically, the idea of this is an application tied to a template. So when you deploy a virtual cluster, it'll deploy that application for you as well. You can define the application. So say your users all need like a certain couple of things installed for every vCluster for it to work, and you don't want to install that stuff on the base cluster as a CRD for some reason. You could use this to create that. I don't know if you have anything you want to add on to that, Jeremy. Like, have you done a lot of work with the apps section?
No, I haven't
Okay.
really. Yeah. So, but I mean, it just does what the
Yeah.
name says it
I'm
does.
gonna, yeah. After I show templates, I'll show the apps to kind of drill down to that and show it a little bit more. So, and then parameters, right? So parameters are pretty important because, like, say you want your users to be able to create something
Well,
and limit it, but
we
you
have a
also
question asking if we
can.
can have custom apps.
Yes.
I believe we do.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. I'll show you. As soon as we're done with the templates, I'll go over to the apps like right after that, and then yeah, I'll show you kind of what the workflow looks like. So let me show parameters real quick. So parameters are something that you could actually add to the template that'll prompt your user for something when they create the virtual cluster. So you can define things that they're allowed to pick, right? So maybe they want to pick, like you're saying, Jeremy, earlier, like maybe they want to pick a certain like ingress controller or something like that that I guess gets installed, or different versions of other things. All right, so I'll save these changes in a minute. Permissions, I can add permissions to it. Advanced options is where you get into like more stuff about Ranch or Argo and stuff that you want to actually configure at the time with the template itself. I'm doing most of that through the settings in the project and stuff instead. And then you can give permissions to people who to be able to edit it and modify it. So let's save this with the parameters. And then what I'll do is I'll create a cluster in a minute and show you what that looks like. But yeah, let's go over to apps. So I had a question about like apps. Can you create custom apps? You can, right? Like, and you can create them with like a kubectl. So you can do like a deployment. You can use Helm, or you can use Bash, right? So for the most part, like you can be able to add like a Helm chart here and be able to deploy it, and then you're going to be able to version it and stuff like that. So you can have multiple versions of the same application, and you can set up those different versions on different templates, and like maybe one user needs the newest version, and then other users like they want like a specific version that's a couple older, or you want to test a new version beforehand. So like you can increment this up, add this to another template, and use that. There is one thing I saw, Jeremy, though, with one of our sales engineers was showing it off. I haven't seen this yet in the UI. There's a way to create a template with an X version so that it'll automatically update whenever you update a template. Have you seen that? Is
I
that a new
have.
feature that I'm just okay? I'm not gonna show it in the future. Yeah. So if you get a demo from Kurt, you'll end up seeing that, which is pretty cool. So then you can add parameters to the app too. Like maybe you have certain sections or certain options that they want to put in information for, like just like we did parameters for the template, right? So maybe there's more options that they need to be able to actually put in for your application. And then you can add an icon so you can make it look pretty, and you give permissions to like who's able to actually modify it and stuff like that. So yeah, you can put in custom applications. So great way to have um, something set up that you want to deploy into each vCluster if you want, or that a certain team needs like a certain stack set up for them to be able to test things. Like perfect for that. I hope that answer your question about the apps. And then all the stuff's documented too. So if you want to try out vCluster.Pro, there's a trial, right? So you can do vCluster.Pro start like on EKS or something like that, and then it'll automatically deploy, and you get I think like 13, 14 days to mess around and play with it. So I'll give more information to that kind of towards the end. All right, so looked at apps. What we can do is look at users real quick. And then for users, this is where you're actually going to manage you manage your users and your teams, right? So here you'll be inviting different users, and then you can add them to different teams. Like I've got our AIML team, which is just basically me and Jeremy, two users. And then you can either add teams or users specifically to each of the the projects here in the settings. Now, there's also, so I haven't set up any of this to connect to like Active Directory or anything like that, Jeremy, but I think like are you able to connect it into LDAP and Active Directory too, so you can,
Yes.
yep,
So any of the major YDC providers we support, so be it Entra ID, I think it's called now for Microsoft, or IAM users and whatnot. We do support a bunch of those. So you can connect with GitHub too. It's
yep.
we support a wide range of YDC provider.
So it's priming you for it. Like I can show like here's all of our options and stuff that you can actually use if you want to have like a single sign on and connect them in, so that you can basically, I think, kind of like map these to different teams, and then you can apply the teams to the
Yeah, essentially
projects.
you'd have a team mapped to a group or
Mhm.
something, and that would be synced automatically.
Awesome. So basically, I mean, add users, pretty simple, right? Like I can just add my user. I can put them on a certain team if I want, and then say I have that team already in a project. That's as easy as it is to add a user to that project, right? Like or multiple projects because they'll get added to that team. All right. So let me close and discard this. I've got Jeremy added on there, and you can set up a password for them if they're not in Active Directory or something like that, or you can send them like a link once you add them in that'll let them off and get everything set up to come in. All right. So that was the SSO. That's kind of a little walk around of the UI. I'm gonna go back into Rancher in a minute, but first I'll show Argo and stuff too. We'll show some of the Pro distro features. So what makes Pro better than open source for certain things are most of these Pro distro features, right? So Pro has all of the base features of open source, and then it adds on some of these more enterprise features like managed embedded etcd, a little bit better HA stuff, some integrated core DNS, sync patches, cross cluster DNS. Which ones of these are you working on, the Pro distro features and stuff? Like which one's the last one that you worked on? If you want to like
So
upsell.
the last one I did was the centralized admission control.
Okay. And what does
Uh,
that do?
so essentially, it allows you to only define a single OPA or a single Kyverno on your cluster, and all of your virtual clusters will connect to it, and will apply those policies. And so the good thing about it, the issue was with open source, you are automatically cluster admin in your vCluster. So your users would potentially be able to remove the mutating hook configurations, for example. And they are not able to do that with the centralized admission control because we stopped those requests at the API level.
You can give specific error messages and stuff with this too. Like you can write out error messages to tell the user why they can't do something instead of
Yeah,
just
so
saying,
essentially it's a custom error message that says this resource is protected, and you cannot delete that even as a cluster admin.
all right. And then so like hard security stuff, it's going to be like instead of using I think we have like what's the base image? It's not based on Alpine. What's the base image? It's just a K3S based on, oh, it
I
is
think
Alpine.
that
Yep. Yeah,
uh,
Alpine. So the Pro is chain guard, right? The Pro is using a chain guard BusyBox image. So that's another upgrade of Pro versus open source. And then the isolated control plane. So isolated control plane is what we see here in vCluster.Pro. This can be running in one cluster, and then you connect all of your other clusters into it. So you're not running vCluster and all this stuff on a server maybe that's got GPUs or something like that. So you're reducing workloads on infrastructure that may already be pretty dense, right? Like I don't want to run vCluster on something that's got GPUs if I'm trying to do all of my work on there and have the users do it. And then I also don't want to run vCluster, core DNS, and all that stuff on each of those either, right? Like so I can do like a headless mode to where everything's kind of running in a control plane, and then it's just scheduling workloads to those clusters instead, which reduces it by what, like I think like one or two, like one pod per vCluster, right? Because if you're running without that, then you're running stuff for vCluster 2 for each virtual cluster, right? So you're like plus oneing everything that you're running in vCluster. All right, so I see a question. I see that K3S is supported with vCluster. If we run vCluster control plane on top of K3S, we want to have multiple virtual clusters within the multiple supported Kubernetes variants. Is there any limitation if we're running on top of K3S? No. So it just changes which version of Kubernetes is deployed in the pod. So you can do any version, K3S, K8, K0S, right? You can create any of those, and it's not based on where this is running or what this is running, right? So it's gonna be like in your templating stuff. You can run any version you want. So like this is a virtual cluster, right? So I can run K8s instead of K3S. Like right now it defaults to K3S. Maybe it'll default to Kubernetes K8s in the future, right? It's not dependent upon where vCluster is running or anything like that because it's Kubernetes running in a pod. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, so that's exactly what you said. And on top of that, you don't even need to run the same Kubernetes version than the host cluster. So for
Yep.
example, the host cluster is a little bit old and you want some new APIs or something, you can run 129 on 127, or you can do the opposite. So you don't want to move too fast, you can run 127 on 129, and it's perfectly fine.
I think I'm assuming some information too. Like if we go back and we talk about like vCluster itself, right? Like vCluster gives you the opportunity, even the open source version, it gives you the opportunity to run different versions of CRDs, different versions of Kubernetes, different versions of all kinds of things for testing. And that's one of the actual use cases too, right? Like, hey, there's this new version of Cert Manager, easy app. It's version whatever. Like I want to make sure that my deployments that I have configured right now will work with that, and that they haven't changed something in the spec that breaks, right? To where like I upgraded on my host cluster and now everything when I create a new version of it breaks because it doesn't know what that spec is or gives me an error saying that, hey, this is now defined as something. I mean, usually with Kubernetes, you get a couple of versions, right? But like, say you're upgrading from like a version and going up like multiple version steps where they've, depreciated a value and have moved it over, that you can run different versions of it, right? Or your users, say you don't want to run a bunch of CRDs on the base cluster because you don't want to manage those as a platform team. Your users can install their own CRDs into their virtual clusters and use them there, right? Like so, say you're running like
They can install multiple instances of the same operator with different versions too. So for example, you have a team that moves a lot faster than the others. They don't have to be stuck with old versions. They can so you can have like in the same host cluster, you can have multiple operators of the same. So let's say you want a Postgres operator, and you can have version 1 and version 3 exactly at the same time and running, and no conflicts whatsoever.
all right, and then let's go over to one more thing I wanted to show off on the website. But yeah, if you want to check out our docs, vCluster.com/pro docs. We've also got some of these other integrations. So like I showed Argo, I showed Rancher, we've got GitHub Actions and GitLab CI. So you can still configure like all this stuff so you can having the CRDs and stuff makes it a little bit easier for this kind of thing too. But this is like different examples of how to create a virtual cluster and delete one for pull requests. And then the ArgoCD integration and stuff can kind of help out if you want to use Argo to deploy all that. All right, but yeah, check out the docs if you want more information on some of that. Let me go ahead and show. We got all right, so when vCluster is provisioned with Rancher integration, does it show up as a new cluster in Rancher? Yeah, it'll show up as a new cluster. Live demo. So of course it was working previously, but there's an error. Let me see what the error actually is. Let me see if I can add it again. Basically, like basically once it goes into like a working state, you're gonna be able to drill down into it just like you would in Rancher for like a regular cluster. So it's gonna show up as a cluster, right? I can click on it, I can drill down, I can do all the stuff that I would be able to do with like local, like I can see projects, nodes, workloads, and stuff like that within it. So maybe that one I'll try to create another one after I show like the Argo stuff real quick, and then we'll see if it comes up. All right, so let's say you want to use Argo, right? Like and you've got the Argo plugin and stuff set up. So what you can do is let's list out our clusters. I'm going to deploy a quick application using that as a target. So I'm going to pull the clusters real quick, and there should be 2 of them. All right, so here's the cluster that I just created and added to Argo. Let me show that in UI too real quick. That might be helpful. All right, log in via Loft. So ArgoCD also has SSO. So I can just, if I'm just using vCluster.Pro, I can connect it into Argo and have my users log in and be able to view Argo and then manage like permissions and stuff there. So if I go to settings and I go to clusters, we can see that that's there now. This is my local base cluster where ArgoCD is installed. And this is the virtual cluster that I just created and added to Argo. And then, so right now we don't have any applications running. So let me copy this. And then let's create the ever popular guestbook application, and hope it runs without any issues. So the workflow. What have I done? I've created a virtual cluster through the vCluster.Pro UI. I've got the ArgoCD integration to where I can add it to ArgoCD afterwards, and then I can deploy to it. Now, since everything is like a CRD, you can automate a lot of this stuff with GitHub and use actual like CI/CD. You can do programmatically what I'm doing here by hand so that you can automate a lot of this stuff, right? Like, and then you can grab the kubectl or the kube config for the users and give them access and stuff like that too. I don't know if you want to add anything, Jeremy, while I'm just showing off the cool everyone touches Argo for the first time thing, but doing it on a virtual cluster.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's Listen, it's cool, cool Argo integration. No, I don't know what to say more actually.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. All right. Let me I'll get the guest book, and then like I said, everything I'm showing on the demo right now is running actually on a home lab I have. So this is all bare metal. But it'll run EKS, GKE. You can run it a bunch of different places. Let's sync it now and see if stuff starts running. And then I'll show the UI. This is all running locally on my server. So you can do it bare metal, you can do it on-prem, you can do it in the cloud, anywhere that Kubernetes is running. Now, for some of the cloud providers, you may need to set up permissions and service accounts and stuff like that, so you have access to create additional services like storage and things like that. But let's go over to the UI. We have our application running now, and it's running in our virtual cluster. So if we go over to our virtual cluster, see, do we see deployments running now? Yep, we have it running there. So like the workflow there is like user creates it, adds it to ArgoCD, starts deploying applications. They start getting deployed into the virtual cluster. And this is all running on the base cluster, just up a level in this namespace. So pretty easy to add it into Argo with the Pro version. I don't know if you want to add anything onto that. I think I kind of my next thing is to show the Rancher demo, but I've kind of shown the Rancher demo. Let me see if I can figure out why it's still pending. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on it. Like if you want, I made a video recently where it goes through the entire thing, shows you how to do the configuration and the setup. I don't know why it's not getting the manifest. I've restarted this and like modified stuff so often. I don't want to go into. I guess I go into logs. What do I do, Jeremy?
Yeah. Um, it
I've
seems
got the
like
integration. Well, so the weird thing about this is like I'm doing everything with public search and stuff like that. So it should work. Let me try create another one. Let me create one more and see if it works. If that doesn't work, then what we'll do is we'll move on. Let me try just a regular template and call it Rancher.
oh, that's the template you used is isolated.
Oh, yep,
That's I think that's why, and so you're not Rancher cannot contact it.
got it. Let me edit and I'll just create another cluster. So let me delete this one. Actually, that's actually still running in Argo, so we good. All right, so now we've got Rancher is pending. So as soon as this one is ready, I'll add that one in, and we'll see if it shows up, and then I can kind of show like the Rancher UI and what it looks like in here. But anyone, if there's any other questions, let us know. I can look at a couple of other things too. Let me go to vCluster CLI while that's going on. So like vCluster CLI too, I can list the different clusters and stuff that I'm running. There's a bunch of different options like I can disconnect, I can connect to it. So users can actually have access to this. They can log in to vCluster.Pro with the CLI, and they can do everything through the command line stuff if they want to. So like say they want to get the configuration for, that's the right one, demo cluster. I think I named it test. Say they want to get the kube config and everything for that, they can do it through the CLI, which is sometimes easier than going in. I think I named it test. There we go. Messing up on my demos now. Let me add this to Rancher. All right, let's see if this one will actually come in and let us drill down into it without any issues. I think I'm also killing my bandwidth too, trying to launch these at the same time that I'm doing video and showing off the demo. And let me get is it test? Is it Rancher? Let me see Rancher. Let me see if I can connect to it again. And tell me what I'm doing wrong. Connect to Rancher, update current faults.
No, so you cannot use the server.
Oh, I'm trying to. Okay. Yep. I'm already connected to the server, so I don't need to say anything. I just need to tell it what the thing is. Yep, there we go. And now I've got the kube config for the Rancher virtual cluster that I just created. So I can do like get kube config, where it's the kube config and then the name. Oh, I'm just breaking stuff. I'm breaking stuff. Sorry. I can show that off in a minute. Let me see if it shows up in Rancher. Here we go. All right, so this is one that we created in the vCluster, and this is actually what it looks like in Rancher for the question about Rancher. I can like drill down and stuff. I can see the nodes. The VMs is actually the node for the cluster I'm working on. I can see different like workloads that are running. I can see applications, basically everything that you can drill down into for a cluster here. You can set up. Now I can also how Jeremy, how would I with some of the pro features, I can put fake nodes in here, right? Like so that's something you may end up wanting to do for users is populating it with like fake node names so they don't
So by
know.
default, it's all fake nodes.
Okay,
So if you want to have real nodes, you can. There's an option to synchronize the real nodes, but by
gotcha.
default, there is only fake nodes because as a security feature, essentially, because the nodes they have a lot of, of informations on.
Yeah,
So yeah,
like EKS is going to show you like region and a bunch of the other information like that
and
on there, which you don't want to
pages and all of that
count.
not necessarily wanting to share with your users. Yep.
Awesome. All right. That's kind of for the most part what I wanted to show off about it. This is just kind of like the demo of like what everything looks like. I think if people want in the future like a start to finish, like how do I do, GitHub Actions and get it running and stuff on there too. That's something that I think we could do. Or if you have or if you want to see more and you want to see like POC style stuff too, like our sales team, our sales engineer is very awesome at showing demos and he's got all kinds of different demos and stuff set up that he can show off how stuff works. I got an upgrade version. And then yeah, so like say there's like for this, there's a new version of the product updates available. It's just gonna Helm update. I can click this and then I can go in and like upgrade it. I want to upgrade it this morning in case it broke anything. So like I didn't want to like just this morning right before the demo showed off. Um, but like I can go here and I can say, upgrade to 3.43. And then what that's gonna do is it's gonna upgrade stuff and it's just all in Helm. I think Helm is in Pro or is in Loft. Oh, I don't remember where it is now. All right, so I won't show Helm list. But anyways, it's all managed through Helm. So like if something happens like where it fails to upgrade or something like that, you just roll back and you can do that. But I don't know if there any other questions? Does people want to see like anything else, anything specific?
There is an
Kind of showed up.
actually. So let's say we have cloud provider for multi-tenant Kubernetes with vCluster. How do we expose the control plane? So
Oh, I
essentially,
missed it.
you can you have a service in your cluster, so you expose it any way you want, and that's it. So it can be an ingress, it can be port forward, it can be a node port, whatever. And as long as you have the credential, you will be able to connect to it.
So you can, yeah, so like this, I can connect to another cluster. That's what you're saying too, right? Like I can connect and add the clusters in. Let me read that too. Yeah, okay. So usually, so going on what Jeremy said. Usually, what I'll do is I'll create an ingress controller on the base cluster. So say we're just doing like one cluster, base cluster ingress controller, and then what you're gonna do is set up an ingress resource to access that vCluster API. Now there's a couple of configuration options that you're gonna need with the ingress controller, like SSL pass through. For Nginx, pretty easy. We got a video kind of on that and documentation. But anything you add SSL pass through, what it'll do is it'll hit that result and then it'll go over to the API endpoint. Otherwise, if you don't have that, like you might run into errors where it's like a mismatch of the certificate. Um,
Okay.
so, but that's gonna be like it's gonna one ingress controller and then ingress resources per virtual cluster is what you're gonna want to set up, right?
And there is an extra question in the question actually, and yeah, so you might run into some issues with the node ports exposing because you need to have no. So the node port is fine actually because it's going to be a node port on the host cluster. What's going to potentially cause issues is the host port because what when you virtualize a cluster, like the node ports, it really represents something physical that we cannot change. So for example, you say I want to the port 2222. It's not going to be working if you have multiple clusters asking for the same host port. Otherwise, everything else is working pretty much as usual.
Yeah, if you can, it's probably better to use a load balancer. But if you have to, like, yeah, you can no port, especially if it's like on-prem or something like that. But Metal LB and a lot of other things should make it at least easier if you're talking about like on-prem stuff for for getting a load balancer service installed. It'd be preferable to use the load balancer, but yeah, we also have documentation on how to use no port. All right, so we also have a question. I want a demo of vCluster.Pro to work as a tenant inside the Octopus deploy cloning the underlying cluster in a given region. Okay, that might be something that maybe our sales team does have information about, like doing a demo like that. I haven't actually done anything with Octopus deploy, but thank you for the question. We'll follow up on that and see if we can show you something interesting like that. All right, so we're getting kind of close to the end. Let's see, do we have any other questions? Great questions so far. Thank you so much for interacting. Hopefully this at least kind of gave you, like, this is more of like an intro to what the vCluster.Pro UI looks like what's different about that versus open source, like how you can use it and do some self-service and add stuff to ArgoCD, add stuff to Rancher, things like that. Show some of the plugins. But if you have any other questions before we kind of wrap it up, I can kind of give some outro stuff. What is the pricing model? Another good question for our sales team and stuff too. I think that depending on how large the I don't know what the pricing is.
So
I
like the
don't.
pricing specifically is I'm not sure about it. It's depending on like the offer that you choose. It's a different
Yeah.
price, but usually it's a flat fee for a platform and then per vCluster.
So yeah, so it also depends on like plugins and stuff too. Like what you see here in front of you this is like all the bells and whistles, right? Like, so if you don't need certain plugins or something like that, like maybe the pricing is different. But yeah, if you want more like demo stuff, just go to vCluster.Pro, and then just do a request a demo. And what that's going to do is head over to our sales group, or you can let us know in here too. Like we can reach out and everything too. Like we'll probably have follow up with the video.
Actually, on the Loft website, you have some example pricing, I think.
Yep.
We
do have some example pricing stuff on there, but like I said, you want to ask some of these questions more to sales stuff. All right, so I've got a 500 vCluster.Pro credit. How long will that allow me to run a single vCluster.Pro instance? I think it's going to depend on how many virtual clusters you're spinning up, right? Like, and then like just one. So you're only going to run vCluster.Pro and just run one virtual cluster within it. I don't know how long that would actually how long it would last. It's a good question. Good question for sales.
Yeah,
we're engineering and marketing. Like that's a good question for sales. I can get that over to him. I think we can get that answer for you, Stan. I don't necessarily know, and I think like a lot of sales stuff, it also depends on like how big the price. I don't know. I don't get to pricing changes based on, like, I guess, like if you're running 100,000 of them versus like like 5 or 6 or something like that, and then like what other features and stuff that you want to add in, and if you're using some of the upgrades and stuff like that. But like I said, request a demo if you want. If you want to get started too, you can go to the docs, and the Pro Start's actually pretty easy. If you do something like if you say you set up EKS, or you are using like GK or something like that, and you just literally install the vCluster CLI, and then you point your configuration over there through kubeconfig, and you vCluster Pro Start, it's going to start it for you immediately, and it's going to give you a public host name to access and start using it. So it's a great way to try out and POC before you actually want to set up a custom domain and set up your own configuration and stuff like that. So it'll give you a public endpoint like this, and then it'll let you log in. And I think it'll give you about 13 or 14 days to try it out. So if you want to try it out, go try it out. If you've never touched vCluster before, I would recommend trying out the open source version just to mess around in a cluster you already have before you get to this, so that you can jump right in and start creating clusters and know what you're kind of doing with it. So like I would start over here, and I would deploy a vCluster in a in a Kubernetes cluster that you already have running. And then after you kind of get a handle on that and like some of the configuration stuff, like I said, I'd go over here to Pro, and then I would try the trial out, and then maybe after the trial, like reach out to sales, and then sales can show some more demos like on CI/CD, or like what kind of stuff we have customers that are already doing with it. Probably any more questions during like that? Everyone's listened to me talk for like 50 minutes straight, so hopefully that was informative. If you have any other questions, let me know. If not, like I said, join Slack, slack.loft.sh. You can ask questions in there. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Jeremy if you want. I'm US time zone, so if you're US time zone, reach out to me and I'll try to answer stuff. If you have questions, you can ask it in vCluster chat or Loft or any of the other channels too. Oh, thank you so much. There you go. There's the Slack link.
A question actually
we have one more.
Yeah, one more, and then how about the maintenance windows during the vCluster operator upgrade? Does it interrupt the provisioning of virtual cluster or impact existing running virtual cluster workload. So no, it doesn't impact your vCluster in any way. So those are not moving when we upgrade the operator. When we upgrade the operator, you might have a slight delay in creating new vClusters, but it's really maybe a few, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, something. It's not going to be impactful in any way.
Yeah, because it's still it's upgrading this like a deployment with Helm, right? Like it's upgrading the deployment. So the API, like you're saying, the API might go down for like a minute or something like that, or less, more like less than a minute, right? Like as the pods are restarting, right? Like, but then also, if you've done any edits to vCluster or anything like that after the fact, you remember that you haven't updated the Helm files. Like, so I keep changing my ingress host name by hand, and then every time I have to go back and modify my ingress host name too. But there's ways you can also upgrade the cluster and upgrade values and stuff like that too. So like say you've deployed vCluster.Pro and you need to change some things like where the ingress is and stuff like that. Like you can do that. But I say thanks for joining us. Hopefully that was informative. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for being here to answer questions and stuff too. It was very helpful. And I said, if anybody you got any closing words, Jeremy, before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. It was thank you, Michael, and thank you
Yep.
everyone who joined. And yep, see you next time.
Yep. We should have. I believe we'll have a follow up. Testing. I think this is recorded, so I think we'll have a follow up. So if you miss anything or you want to show this off to somebody or something like that, we should have this. I think I'm going to post it on. I think we're posting on YouTube too. So if you miss anything, you can come back and watch it again. If you have any questions, yeah, just join our Slack and other things. But thank you so much.